If we continue along the path that we've been on for the last 50 years, we will destroy the ecosystem as we know it. It will become uninhabitable.
In the last 80 years, corporate interests and the factory farming model has taken over the way we produce our food in the United States.
Today, 4 giant companies control 84% of the beef market.
Modern farming practices like tilling, heavy fertilizer use, and pesticides are damaging soil, contaminating water, and ultimately draining our global resources.
This model has created astounding efficiency in our nation's food production, but at the same time is absolutely destroying our land, essentially torturing our animals, and now we are being told that our diet is a major contributor to climate change.
It's the worst thing we eat when it comes to global warming, is beef.
Starvation will result if we continue to farm the way we have for the last 80 years.
But what if there was another way to feed our planet and feel good about it? Deep in the countryside of Georgia, there is a family farm that is solving some of the world's biggest problems, like climate change, perishing topsoil, and animal cruelty. Farming with the goal of reinvigorating the land rather than exploiting it. So how does it work? Does this way of producing food really have the power to balance our climate and feed the world? I drove to Georgia to explore these questions and find out about this farm's unique story against the corporate food machine.
My name is Will Harris, and I'm the 4th generation of my family to own and manage White Oak Pastures. We run it today as a regenerative cattle farm.
There's about 1,000 mamas out here with about 700 babies on them right now. They see me, they started moving down towards the gate because they know that if I'm here, I'm giving them a treat, fresh grazing. What we're trying to accomplish here is just replicate nature. How would they act if there was no fences, if there was no power? Cows naturally roam. Why? Because predators are behind them. Predators follow prey. So that's how they naturally move. So you're trying to kind of replicate that with your paddocks by moving them every day, allowing them to roam through each paddock. We'll set up the fences, let them in, they'll roam here for a day, and then move the next day, constantly moving every single day, just like they would in nature.
Even 10 years ago, 8 years ago, this was a field where the farmers planted peanuts, cotton, corn, and I was able to buy it. And it's just now becoming a good pasture. I used to have a feedlot. I used to raise cows in a feedlot, where they're very close, shoulder to shoulder. That's instinctive behavior. That's doing what they want to do. There's no stress. The animals they're happy animals. Prior to 1995, I farmed very, very industrially.
This is a very highly confined and very intensive sort of an operation, a lot of cattle.
For me, then, it was all about production, which tied to profitability. We used all the tools that reductive science had given us to increase production and reduce cost. Today we farm in a manner that I call regeneratively, that is in cooperation with nature. We're not using tools to fight nature.
Regenerative agriculture is a philosophy of farming that simply means to leave the land better off every season that passes.
There's life in the soil. And that's one of the big differences between a more regenerative approach to agriculture as opposed to more conventional approach to agriculture. Where in conventional agriculture, we rely on a lot of chemical inputs to kill weeds, right, and to feed our plants. But with a natural cycle, we look for the bacteria in the soil to help bring life to the soil.
Will's farm focuses on soil regeneration through photosynthesis and animal impact, which has the potential to turn agriculture into a carbon-negative operation and combat climate change. As we just saw, White Oak Pastures moves their animals on a daily basis to fresh pasture. When the cattle move on to the next paddock, all that grass that has been eaten down has time to rest and regrow. It's during this regrowth that plants engage in photosynthesis, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere to use it as fuel to regrow. Part of that carbon is sent down into the roots, which feeds the microbes in the soil, thereby creating organic matter, the life in the soil. This is where carbon is sequestered from the atmosphere, thereby creating healthier land.
My land used to be 0.5% organic matter. Today it's over 5% organic matter.
For every 1% increase in organic matter, an acre of soil stores an additional 10 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere.
That whole messaging about cattle are destroying the earth through global warming is just crap. Cattle production done in the normal way that I used to do it, I'm sure does create greenhouse gas. Done the way I do it today, it reverses that. On my farm, our cattle sequester more carbon than they emit. Not only are they not part of the problem, they're part of the solution.
This is the beautiful cycle behind the philosophy of regeneration. But the way we farm today has the exact opposite effect.
The industrial model is based on monocultures. You just raise one thing, one species of animal, one crop. And you use all sorts of technologies to reduce the competition to that species that you've chosen to produce. I don't believe you can come up with a single ecosystem in the world that just has one species of plant or animal or microbe in it. You know, in nature, there's a whole community of plants and animals and microbes living in symbiotic relationships, benefiting each other.
We grow all of our vegetables using soil health principles like covering the soil, using cover crops, and keeping roots, living roots in the soil as much as we possibly can. We don't use any herbicides and any kind of fungicide, so we're really just trying to build soil health and have those nutrients pass on to our fruits and vegetables versus pumping the soil full of like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, which would be kind of your typical agriculture. Our main outlets are really the local community, so we sell in our general store. We give a number of our vegetables to the commissary, where they produce value-added goods like jams and ketchup. We provide the bulk of our food to our on-site restaurant, and they try to do as much as possible farm to table.
This all sounds perfect, but there is a common argument against regenerative agriculture that argues that once the soil reaches a certain amount of carbon sequestration, it can't absorb any more carbon, so there's really no point.
That is absolutely true. The soil cannot maintain a certain level of carbonization, but it can get thicker and thicker and thicker. Soil used to be much deeper than it is now. You know, we've expended it through cultivation and chemical fertilizer and other damaging production methods that we've used. We can build it back. So this young lady is about to move this set of turkeys. There's no floor in this turkey house, so they can get exposed to bugs and plants. She's moving them for two reasons: to give some fresh bugs and plants for the turkeys to eat, and to keep from concentrating the manure in one place. The manure is beneficial for the land if it's spread out across it. It's toxic for the land if it's all in one place. Even now, 30 years after I started improving my land, the land is still getting better.
As White Oak Pastures strengthens their land and its ability to hold carbon and water, they are solving industrial agriculture's biggest problem: erosion. Erosion is when soil dies and becomes dirt. It begins when farmers use tilling machines to break up the soil and prepare it for planting.
So this land has been harrowed. What that does is it removes all the vegetative cover so the sun shines directly on the surface of the soil. And it'll get over 100 degrees. And when it's over 100 degrees, it kills all the microbes in the soil. Essentially, this soil is being sterilized right now. So here's a couple of soil samples. This one came from my farm. This one came from just across the fence from my farm, a neighbor's farm. With a lot of chemical fertilizer, a lot of pesticide, a lot of tillage. There's very little life in this soil. This one, conversely, is an organic soil that's teeming with life. This came off my land that had been grazed in perennial grasses for 20 years. And this one is a little over 5% organic matter, and this one is about 0.5% organic matter. So this is what animal impact does. This is what happens when land is allowed to grow in perennial plants and be grazed by ruminants, and the waste drop back onto the land, reabsorb, drop back on the land in a cycle. And this is just so much more productive. 1% organic matter will absorb about a 1-inch rainfall. So this land will only absorb about 1/2 inch of rain before it runs off. This land will absorb 5 inches before it runs off. When the 6 inches of rain came, my farm soaked up most of it. And what ran off my farm was still fairly clear water. What ran off his farm was 5.5 of the 6 inches of topsoil, subsoil, whatever's left out there. And then what's not visual is the amount of pesticide and fertilizer that would have been in it. But ultimately, all that water goes into the Apalachicola River and Apalachicola Bay. Apalachicola Bay was a really wonderful oyster fishing ground all my life. But it's closed now because there's been so much runoff with so much pesticide and fertilizer, the oyster population has rapidly declined. Yet another example of what's happened all over the world.
This is just one example showing the effects of erosion. Agricultural erosion, or runoff, is also disrupting the cycle of precipitation, leading to drought, contaminating our drinking water, which all has detrimental health impacts on both humans and our ecosystems.
The damage that we have done to our planet, to our environment, are unintended consequences of these technologies that have been developed to maximize production and profitability.
So when did the whole system of industrial agriculture begin?
My dad told me that after the war was over, probably in 1945, fertilizer salesmen came and fried fish for the farmers, free meal. And he gave all the farmers that came a bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. And asked them to go home and sprinkle it around and wet it in the pasture. So it was just beautiful. You know, the grass was, where we put the ammonium nitrate fertilizer was this much higher and several shades greener than what was on each side of it. That set the hook to think, wow, these technologies that people are selling us are good. Ooh, they were really good. So when the next guy came by and wanted to sell a pesticide, the farmers were ready to buy it. People became specialists.
Through science and technology, agriculture works newer and newer miracles.
Farmers no longer just served a local market.
These products come from farms and ranches despite distance and season.
So these big centralized companies formed, and they had the appetite for all these ingredients, these commodities to put into it.
Tremendous advances on the farm have created this miracle.
So it went from guys like my dad raising a lot of different things on the farm to being a specialist, and my dad chose cattle. I was born into that and embraced it and loved it. Paid taxes every year for 20 years running the farm as an industrial cattle confinement operation. I was literally feeding chicken shit to cattle. I would buy chicken litter from big industrial chicken houses. I knew the recipes, how to mix it with corn and molasses. And I would feed that very cheap feed to cattle and get very cheap weight gains. And I had to give them a lot of medicine because, you know, that's not the healthiest diet in the world, but it was okay, it was legal medicine. Feeding unnatural feeds to cattle is very, very common. Bread-type products that get old on the shelf is ground up plastic and all and fed to animals. All kinds of things are fed to cattle to get cheap weight gain. I thought my animal welfare was above reproach. The cattle were held in confinement. They were well fed. They were kept watered. We thought that was as good as you could hope to do. And then I realized it was not. One morning we loaded up, I remember it like it was yesterday, we loaded up a load of steers to be shipped to the Midwest. And you can put 100 500-pound steers on a semi-truck, with the ones on top urinating and defecating on the ones on the bottom. And they'll be on that truck for a day or two without food or water or rest. And, you know, they've never been on a truck before. They've born and raised in this pasture here. It was not a good experience for me. And I decided then I'm going to do something different. Cows are meant to roam and graze. And if they can't do that, they're not fulfilled. They're not happy. Hogs are meant to root and wallow. Chickens were meant to scratch and peck, and so on and so on and so on. And in the industrial confinement model, they're not allowed to do that. That day it was about animal welfare, but it very quickly became about the land and the water and the whole physical well-being of the farm. These chickens are on the ground all their life. They can scratch and peck and forage, eat insects. We move them on a regular basis.
They get to go to new fresh grass about once a week. Better than industrial. I guess they stay in about one spot their whole life.
Very healthy, shiny, well-feathered chicken, all of them. It's obvious to me that the cycles of nature are operating optimally right now. And it spins off an abundance that's the wealth that we live on. And I just really didn't give the financial consideration I should have. You know, I just did what I wanted to do. I had land, basically turned the animals out, and didn't make money anymore for a while. You know, I had heard of grass-fed beef and a movement towards grass-fed beef. This is the 90s. It was not a big deal back then. Immediately, started researching, how can I get in that business? I couldn't have afforded to gotten back out. I was so far in, the only way out was out the other side. Do or die. I borrowed $2.8 million and built my processing plant. I started having animals slaughtered and marketing the beef. Not many people were producing it, so there was not a huge market, but it was a hungry market. We were able to sell our beef at a premium into that market, and it worked out for us financially. We slaughter about 25 cows per day, and they generate about 9 tons of what's called packing plant waste. That would be the eviscerate, the gut fill, hooves, some bones. So we bring this waste here and compost it and let the microbes have their way with it. Then we let it sit for a year and we spread it on our pastures and it turns into beautiful grass. A huge processing plant that kills thousands of head per hour would generate so much waste it wouldn't be manageable in this way. In nature, there is no waste. We operate White Oak Pastures as a zero-waste farm by finding a use for everything.
This entire building and the 12 jobs that go along with it came out of compost. And we used everything that originally was composted to make aftermarket finished goods.
This is Anthony and Marcus, and Anthony is our pet department supervisor. And what they're doing is defleshing the hide, getting it ready to make a raw hide.
The hides are turned into leather products and rawhide products.
We use the suet fat around the kidneys of the cow to make our tallow beef products. So our tallow, which would be waste, so would usually go to compost, after it's rendered down, it makes all these beautiful products. So it's mixed with coconut oil, essential oils, olive oil, and castor oil, and that's how we make these finished products. So what normally would be a waste is then transformed into a usable product. So we have anything from our candles to our moisturizer to our body wash to our foaming soap, lip balms, and even our lard moisturizer, which is pork fat rather than beef fat, and then our bar soap.
We emulate nature, and in nature everything is utilized. My farm went from $1 million a year in volume to 20-something million dollars a year in volume. And I thought I was really an early innovator that was changing the way we were going to produce food in America. Consumers were learning more and more about their food. We were selling more and more. Things got better and better until they didn't get better and better, and they leveled out and they declined a little bit. And that happened when the greenwashing started.
Looking green sells.
Grass-fed, free range, humanely raised.
Let our company's advertising show you what we want you to see.
Greenwashing is taking a commodity and describing it in a manner that deceives the consumer to make them think it was raised better, more humane, greener.
Free range, look that up online. Free range, they only have to have access to the outside for like an hour a day or 30 minutes a day or something like that.
Today, if you walk in your local grocery store and pick up a package of beef, it can say product of USA. But the animal born and raised and slaughtered in another country. So that's not product of the USA. The big multinational food companies can price that product anywhere they want to. So they bring it down just a little bit below what people like us can do for them, and they own the market. And it's very difficult for consumers to figure it out and really know what they're getting. Unless that consumer knows the farmer, knows the farm, they're probably getting tricked. Now, you may not know Will Harris personally and come to White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, but you need to know you could if you wanted to, and a lot of people do. And it would be better if you did. I thought I was part of the movement to change the way we produce food in this country, maybe in the world. I hope that's the case, but I may just be a niche provider. I may just be providing really good beef and pork and lamb and vegetables and eggs to a very small number of people that can afford it. But that's not where I thought I was headed. That's not where I wanted to head.
There are some real challenges to being relevant and staying alive in the food business, especially if you're an artisan niche producer with a lot of intentions outside of profit and margin. White Oak Pastures and others are completely dependent on consumers deciding that they want something different. If consumers don't vote with their dollars to say this is what's important to us, farms like ours won't be around.
To a great extent, I feel like the big multinational food companies have won. They produced cheap food when the country needed cheap food, and they got really good at it. And they kept producing food to the point they got us all addicted to it. We, White Oak Pastures and others, developed a system to produce food that was better but not cheaper, and it appeared to be catching traction. And now it doesn't appear to be catching traction. It appears that the really cheap greenwashed food is in control. My friends and neighbors and relatives here continue to be industrial commodity farmers. This is super highly subsidized. This would be a money-losing deal if not for the government. We have spent a tremendous amount of time and effort and money moving into this humane, sustainable, regenerative place, and we've been successful with it, but the return on investment here is not as good as they're getting, with a lot more risk. So financially, they're better off doing what they're doing.
When you vote with your dollar, you say, this is what I want to continue. Sometimes I don't think people think about their own individual purchasing power.
My vision of things done right would be a tremendous number of small, independent food producers producing food for their communities or greater communities all over the world.